Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
Okay, and welcome. I want to take a chance to introduce you to our presenters for today. They are subject matter experts for GP strategies on delivery resource management, and it is my pleasure to introduce them to you today. First, we have Megan Bridget. She is a senior director. She supports all our global training programs. Megan also recruits and hires project managers, our facilitators and instructional designers to meet our clients' needs. She also manages the instructor scheduling, tracks certification of programs, and ensures that instructors keep up to date on client information. And also, we have Fran Calavita. She's a senior manager. She works closely with GP Strategies worldwide hubs to ensure that they have the right resources with the right skill set, language, background, and location. Fran's team coordinates all aspects of delivery resource management, including vetting, onboarding, facilitator producer readiness, and a quality assurance process to deliver virtual training on various platforms. We have a great discussion today. And with that, Megan and Fran, welcome, and I'm going to let you have it from here.
Thanks, Kim. Great, thank you, Kim, and hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us today. We wanted to start in sharing, a little bit about our department that Fran and I lead. We lead our Delivery Resource Management Group for GP Strategies, and our Delivery Resource Management Group is our centralized hub to source all of the vital, roles such as facilitators, virtual facilitators, coaches, producers, as well as moderators. The Delivery Resource Management team, we've actually recently built out a training and certification program for effective virtual facilitation skills, as well as producer skills. And with that actually includes a digital badge. Our facilitators deliver on a variety of topics, from things like leadership, employee engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion, executive presence, and many, many more. Currently, GP Strategies has an associate network that actually contains over 1,000 global resources. And with that, I'm excited to dive into our session today, as virtual and digital learning has been very popular, over the past probably 2 years. It's really accelerated many organizations' digital and virtual learning transformation. And so during the beginning of the pandemic, many organizations were faced with making decisions on how to move forward with their learning and development strategies. Organizations really had to quickly prioritize which programs and initiatives are we going to move forward with, which are our top priority, which are crucial to the organization. And then from there, they had to quickly scramble to create a strategy on how to move forward in a virtual and digital world. Many organizations adapted their in-person sessions over to a virtual modality, having very little time to spend on redesign and redevelopment. It was at a very fast pace. Now that organizations are returning to office work life, learning and development groups really are working to make decisions on what's going to return to in-person and what are they going to continue to leverage the virtual and digital platforms with. And for those that remain in that virtual setting, that bar is being raised. Because of the scramble and quick adaptation, organizations were at the time kind of fine with good enough. But now we're in that steady state. The expectation is really moving from good to great. Oops, so I apologize. My mouse wanted to be a little sensitive there, so it skipped over here. All right, so we actually wanted to start things off with a quick pulse check to see what direction your organization is heading towards. So the quick poll here that Kim just opened up is, what percentage of learning do you anticipate your organization is going to keep virtual in the coming year? So our options right here right now are 0 to 25%, 26% to 50%, 51% to 75%, or 76% or higher. So how much do you anticipate your organization's going to keep virtual in the next year? So we'll give a moment or so to answer. All right. Give everybody a moment to respond. All right, and Kim, how are we looking? Do we need to keep it open another moment? Enough responses? All right, so we can go ahead and close the poll. Hopefully everyone had a chance to answer. All right, great. So let's see. So taking a look here at the poll results, it looks like, the majority of you are kind of falling into group B, it appears, with the 26 to 50% or the 51 to 75% seems to be, kind of the higher end of the answers as well. And that's wonderful. We're seeing a lot of organizations, plan to, oh, I apologize. I didn't see the 75. Oh, goodness. All right. So this changes a little bit here. So we're seeing answers C and D to be the top runners here. So 51 to 75% or 76% or higher in the next year. That is fantastic. And yeah, we're seeing a lot of organizations decide to keep many of their programs they migrated over to that virtual setting and keep them virtual in the years to come. There have been a lot of key benefits that organizations have really recognized as they've made this quick change over to the virtual setting, such as financial impact. You're not having to pay for travel or pay for hotels or lodging, any of those types of financial components. Ease of access, the fact that their participants and learners can access the learning anywhere, anytime. As well as speed. Those are a lot of the reasons that people are deciding to keep it virtual. But with this in mind, though, organizations are really raising the bar since this is going to be the solution that'll be in place for years to come. And I apologize, my mouse just wants to be really sensitive, so I'll work on that. But as organizations work to improve their virtual offerings, it's important to keep the learner at center. This includes all of the steps of the learning process. So from needs analysis to design and development through implementation, deployment, as well as to delivery and follow-up. Those are all important times where that learner needs to be at the center of our minds as we're going through each of those stages. And in today's session, we're going to focus on virtual delivery and digital delivery, as well as strategies to help elevate your virtual learning again, from good to great. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Fran.
Great. Thanks, Megan. Yes, it is time to raise the bar. As Megan just mentioned, how do we elevate our virtual learning from good to great? Learning teams need to put the tools, learning technologies, and structures in place to enable learning delivery across an organization. So, as we think about moving folks from surviving to thriving in a virtual environment, establishing opportunities to learn and grow are critical. Here's a question for you. What are the most common virtual learning challenges that you have witnessed? Let us know in the chat. So if you can just answer in the chat, what common virtual learning challenges have you witnessed? Oh, I see engagement, internet connectivity, yes, communication issues, technology, savviness, I love that. Keeping an audience engaged, that is really key, maintaining engagement, harder to create interactivity, technology literacy, that's a good one too. Signups report, these are great answers. And then of course the interactive tools, breakouts, enrollment, attendance, all great answers, great answers. These are right on. We have all experienced these challenges in the past year, so it's even more important now to raise the bar. So now with the shift to virtual and digital learning, we can go to the Next slide, Megan. We want to make sure that the learners are engaged throughout the journey. That is why these roles are so critical in the success of an interactive and engaging virtual implementation. Megan and I delivered our last webinar on the 3 roles your organization needs for virtual delivery. First, we have the virtual facilitator. The facilitator will make sure the learners have an understanding of the content and engage them, as well as make it a safe place to speak their mind, share insight and experiences with their virtual colleagues. The producer supports the facilitator as well as the learners in front and behind the scenes to make sure that the learners have an engaging and interactive session with little disruption, and also make sure the facilitator is doing what they do best, and that's facilitating. The moderator has a very visible role. They need to keep a large group of learners engaged throughout a lengthy cohort, as well as provide content for learners, respond to comments, and just being that primary point of contact for the learners and encouraging their participation throughout the digital experience. And then we have a 4th role, the program coordinator. The coordinator helps to put all the pieces together and supports the event logistically, as well as communicating to everyone internally as well as externally, and making sure they all have what they need to perform their role effectively, as well as answering any questions along the way. So let's open up a poll. Many organizations use a variety of learning technologies and tools, from an LMS to virtual platforms to e-learning, survey tools, you name it. When thinking of your organization's technology ecosystem, how many technologies or tools are being used? Please write that or answer your poll. Don't write in the chat, answer the poll. Okay.
So we're going. I'd give it a few more minutes, a few more seconds to allow people to really answer. They look like they're in progress and discussing, so I'd give it another 20 seconds or so.
Fantastic. All right.
Okay, I'm going to close the poll.
All right. Thanks, Kim.
Yep.
Okay, I know sometimes the poll results, it takes a minute for the poll results to come up. And here they are. Okay, so how many learning technologies does your organization use? It looks like that B, 3 to 5, is the answer that most of you have, 3 to 5. Okay, that's really interesting. We're just seeing a lot of organizations trying to reduce the amount of learning technologies being used. And thank goodness for single sign-on, because who can remember all those passwords? It is hard to manage and can be overwhelming to the learner, as well as costly to the organization's budget and time. I like this quote I got from one of our internal articles. The best run business are those that focus on utilizing their technology to support their people, not the other way around. Right? So that is why it's so important to select the right platform that meets the needs of the specific training. You want to make sure it has a lot of interaction capabilities. Also, if needed, administrative reporting and analytics. Using the right platform as well as having support from the right team is key. We know even the smallest hiccups can affect the learner's experience. Using annotation and interactive tools, as well as calling on folks, is pertinent to keeping the attention of the learners and keeping it interesting. We want to avoid Zoom fatigue or WebEx fatigue, whatever we're calling it, and we don't want them to start multitasking. Accessible and easy, we want platforms that work, that are familiar. We don't want to download, install, or comb through a user's manual, just to load a file. When technology implementation and adoption goes well, they can produce significant cost reductions, improve productivity, a more engaged workforce, great business results, and a healthy return on investment.
Great, Fran.
So,
If I can pause us here, there's a question that came in that I thought lines nicely to kind of the learning technology strategy. And
oh,
one of
fantastic.
participants, yeah, shared that one of the challenges is facilitating an on-site and online at the same time. So maybe you have participants who are face-to-face and participants who are over a virtual platform, and any technology tips, how to best manage that when you've got an audience that's split between two worlds.
Yes, no, and that is a great question. And, as people are going back into the classroom, there are still those that are not. And we're finding now that globally, virtual works great. So many of our larger global clients are saying, this works great, it's cost effective and, scalable. So maybe we can do both, but we do know that some learners work better, in the classroom, face to face. So yeah, we've seen, in many of our trainings where, there is a webcam. And so the facilitator is working both virtually and, with the classroom, and maybe with the virtual learners, they're using some different interactive tools, like the chat and, some of the functionality like annotation tools, so that they can answer and participate, as well as, the learners that are face-to-face in the classroom. But yes, we are definitely seeing more of that as well.
Yeah, and I've seen some organizations too where they have a blend of on-site and online attendees, use different variety of tools. Audio is definitely a very important piece. That way the virtual participants are able to hear the people who are in person and vice versa. So making sure to have speakers, and I've even also seen too some organizations use robotics where they actually have virtual participants join through actually a robot that zooms around the classroom, so that, say, their breakout sessions, they can participate in that way as well. So there are a variety of different tools, and I think we're scratching the surface as a work world. And I think there's going to be more and more tools to come to help solve for that problem.
Absolutely. Great question.
Great. Thanks, Fran.
Okay. So this leads in, a good lead in. So what tools do you use to engage your participants? I know in the last chat, some folks were putting in some of the tools that they use. Let us know in the chat. Polls, role play. Yep, readbacks. Absolutely. Any others? Slido. I haven't used that one, but I know a number of these, additional add-ons people are using as well. Open-ended question scenarios, Kahoot, Adobe Connect poll questions, small breakouts with teams. Yes, breakouts are great. Whiteboards, concept boards, scenarios, breakouts, Mentimeter. Actually, we have a client right now using Mentimeter. Breakouts in MS Teams, SurveyMonkey for feedback. Yep, absolutely. Great answers, all great answers. Right. As we discussed, using the interactive tools available on the platform, as well as encouraging learners' participation, is key and can also be fun. Breakouts, polls, whiteboards keep the learners engaged, as well as giving them multiple ways to express their thoughts. And even though it might not be vocal, it gives them a voice and contribution to the current activity or conversation. Post check, those participation buttons, raising hands, check marks, X's, emoticons. We love our emoticons, wherever possible, to solicit responses. Seeding discussion threads to get more participation. Effectively using the chat, as we've done today, Sometimes the session is too large and some folks do not voluntarily like to speak up, but learners do chat and feed off each other's responses, and it motivates them to chat their ideas, thoughts, and reactions. So I think, Michelle, you just had a question. Hi, Michelle. I remember you from some time ago. Nice to see your name up there. Can you describe pulse check and how this would show up? So when we said pulse check, sometimes a facilitator during the session might have just went over an activity or explained an activity and said, okay, let's just do a pulse check. How many, understand what I just, the activity that I just covered, please put a check mark. Or sometimes it's used, after a break during the session, and the facilitator might say, okay, for those who are back, please put a check mark if you're back. Or they might say, put an emoticon, put up an emoticon to let me know that you're here. So, and then, the raising of hands, sometimes, again, if there's a large session or the facilitator might be asking a group, a question or to respond to one of the activities, they might say, raise your hand, if you have an answer to this question, or if you have more to say about the activity we just covered. So they can be really effective in virtual learning. I hope that answered your question, Michelle. Great. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Megan.
All right, wonderful. Thanks, Fran. And when it comes to the virtual and digital setting, it's really important that you're building energy and building connections in the virtual classroom. And in virtual settings, the learner has distractions, like Fran was mentioning earlier. There's sometimes distractions all around us, emails popping up or instant messages coming through. Sometimes our four-legged friends that come and have some distractions. I know my kittens like to distract me at the most inopportune times. And we're all, working, some of us are still working from home. And this is where a facilitator really needs to provide even more energy than an in-person session, because they need to keep their attention. They have to have that energy going, that momentum going, and help to for the participants to stay focused. Also keeping in mind too that it's fostering connections, not only with the facilitator and the learners, but also for the other participants to have an opportunity to connect one another and build their virtual network. And so for virtual facilitation, it's important to gauge and engage the audience by calling on people's names, in particular, using their names. And one tip that I've done while facilitating virtually is I actually have a roster always by my side of the participants, and I actually check off when they've contributed or shared. This is helpful for me to see are individuals, under participating or haven't had an opportunity to contribute. Maybe they need to be called on to, keep them engaged or help them feel confident to share their thoughts, as well as help control maybe those that I kind of tag as the monopolizers who maybe are sharing more and not allowing maybe that opportunity for others to participate. Also, you want to read virtual body language. And when I've talked about virtual body language, people sometimes scratch their head, but when facilitating in person, we're able to read body language. We can see that people are sometimes checking their phone. Maybe they're looking for the bathroom break, or, maybe they're just not as engaged, even sometimes nodding off. And in a virtual environment, we don't have those visual cues unless we're, of course, using webcams. And webcams can be a helpful tool to keep us, from being able to see that, virtual body language. But sometimes there are other things as well. What's that level of participation in activities or discussions? Seeing, are they contributing to the chat? Are they completing the polls? And some platforms too even offer ways that you can monitor how engaged are your participants in the content. So knowing those tips and tricks can help you to make sure that you're keeping your participants engaged. as well as collaboration being key. You want to make sure to avoid a one-way discussion. And lastly, there's that power of peer pressure and peer support. And peers can really help motivate others to interact and contribute to discussions and share ideas, as well as partnering too with clients. We've seen where partners use competitions in their learning journeys to drive connection and engagement throughout the learning journey itself. So we know we've covered a lot of information today, and many of these items reviewed were, from things like selecting the right technology and tools to creating a safe learning environment and building those connections. They're all working to keep the learner at center through the virtual and digital learning journey. As we shared earlier, keeping that learner at center is a crucial step in helping elevating your offerings. And as Fran shared earlier, it's important to have the right team. And if you're interested in learning more about our recent webinar, on our website, underneath the resource section, you can check out our recent webinar, The 3 Roles Your Organization Needs for Virtual and Digital Delivery. It really, dives deeper into that topic. And lastly, we want to make sure that all parties supporting the virtual and digital delivery are aligned on their roles and responsibilities. So it's having the right team and having that right recipe for success. So we thank you all, for attending. And in our last few moments together, we wanted to open up the floor for some Q&A, just to have an opportunity to answer any questions that you had in particular.
Yeah, Megan, I just answered one. Alicia had asked in the chat, so if anybody wants to
We have
please do.
Have a couple questions under Q&A, and we have about a minute left. So we're going to try and answer those. And if there's nothing, if we don't get a chance to answer them, we will be sure to include an answer in the follow-up if we can. Okay, so quickly, I just want to ask you, the question is, if companies decide to keep it virtual for the next year or so, how's that going to impact the engagement during these times, which includes turnover and the current state of decisions to be vaccinated or not? Do you have any input on that?
Sure, and I can take this, Fran, and if you want to pepper in as well. And yeah, I mean, it's a challenge that I think is facing a lot of organizations right now, with the blend of returning in person as well as some remaining virtual. And I've seen a lot of organizations deploy more frequently employee engagement surveys, as well as even, like we were talking about earlier, this pulse check, so that you're able to get some real-time feedback on how people are feeling engaged in a workforce, but also from a learning experience. A lot of organizations are moving towards that virtual or digital learning journey. That way they're able to capture, a wide variety of participants across the globe, making learning available at the moment of need for a lot of learners versus sometimes the constraints that in-person has. But I think it's being conscientious, keeping the learner at center, really thinking of your audience. Okay, this person will be in person. What do they need? What's different about their learning experience? And then doing the same for the participants who will be doing virtual and digital, and making sure that you do have accommodations for both types of groups, because there may be individuals who aren't yet ready to return to the work office. So I think keeping that learner at center is really key. And thinking of your audience. Fran, I didn't know if anything you wanted to add as well.
No, I think you covered it, and absolutely some of these larger interactive platforms, we're using, Intrepid here at GP Strategies with some of our large clients. And as you said, the learner can work at their own pace in the middle of the night, early in the morning, and, and that works for some, and really trying to keep them engaged along the way.
Okay, we are at the end of our time, but I do want to ask this one question because I think it's really a really good one. So do you have any icebreaker suggestions for delivering hybrid workshops and ensure those joining online and in person all feel included and part of the training?
Great question. So we've seen, where there have been, say, audiences in person and audiences in a virtual setting. I've seen a lot of really neat activities over the past year when there is that blended approach, from things like bingo, where you're actually having a getting to know you bingo, and participants are able to use presentation in a virtual setting,
Yep.
and then the participants are able to use the, handout in their live setting. So sometimes that's become a really nice icebreaker. Sometimes even the simple old school ones like Two Truths and a Lie, where actually the virtual participants have theirs on a PowerPoint slide. They list there and have their webcams so we can see if they have poker faces, and then vice versa with the handouts that our in-person participants are able to do. So it's really imagining maybe some of the common icebreakers, but how do you make sure, again, keeping that learner at center, how do they work effectively with one another, making sure each group is included and not feeling left out or omitted. Fran,
Yeah.
I didn't know if you've seen some others as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that even some of our internal groups who have meetings have a icebreaker just on their weekly meeting, just to, talk about, what's your favorite show on Netflix, or, just something to, not that it needs to be personal, but really just to get some type of reaction from each other and really get to know each other a little bit better. And, so I know that these groups, it's really effective, and it makes a really positive meeting because everybody, kind of gets ramped up and, excited about, talking about work related stuff, fun stuff.
Well, Fran and Megan, I want to thank you so much today for the great discussion. We have covered a lot in this session, and there's still more information. So we're going to encourage you that if you want to continue the conversation, we do have our presenters' contact information there available. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to Fran and Megan. I'm sure they'll be able to answer them for you. And again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I hope you had a great time with us today. And we look forward to seeing you at one of our next presentations. Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you for
Bye,
joining
everyone.
us.
This webinar is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can access more webinars or download additional resources at gpstrategies.com/resource-library.